Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, located in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, Himalaya, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a great show lined up for you today. Author of the middle grade novel, A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation, Pablo Cartaya, is here to celebrate with us. And later on in the show, again, to celebrate Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we'll be taking a listen back to a conversation we had with TV news anchor Michelle Lee. Hey, families, would you like to share a miracle with your kids? At the Wolf Conservation Center, hope was fading. The endangered Mexican wolves dreamed of a pup, but none had come. Until one tiny miracle changed everything. Meet Trumpet, a real-life wolf pup whose incredible birth brought joy, hope, and a lesson in conservation. Trumpet the Miracle Wolf, written by Leocadia George, is a heartwarming true story that will inspire your whole family. Teach your kids the power of hope, love, and protecting endangered species. Get your copy today and join the wild adventure. Hey, my friends, would you like to bring a little warmth and magic into your home? Let me introduce you to Welsh Mountain Candles, hand-poured on a working Amish farm in Lancaster County. These all-natural, toxin-free candles are made from palm wax with a stunning crystallized glow, rich coconut apricot wax for a creamy finish, and essential oils for a pure, refreshing scent. Whether you're winding down, setting the mood, or just love a great candle, Welsh Mountain Candles are crafted with care and made to be shared. Visit welshmountaincandles.com. Use the promo code JED10 for 10% off your order today. Light up your home with Welsh Mountain Candles, where every candle tells a story. Join us right now from the beautiful Miami area in Florida. Our guest is here today to celebrate his new middle grade novel. Is called A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation. Please welcome to the show, Pablo Cartaya. Hey, Pablo, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jed. Thank you for having me on.
Delighted to have you on. A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation. What an intriguing title.
It's a title is a very interesting, has its own very interesting kind of history to it. And how books become the titles that they become often, take various journeys of their own. When I was kind of fiddling around with this story, what ended up happening was that it was such an epic journey just to get the story done, that I kind of, when the title that kept coming back to me with this sort of kind of whimsical, could mean a lot of things kind of title. And because the book, a lot of the structure of the book is kind of modeled after Joseph Conrad's The Hero's Journey. One of the narrators in the book, there's 4 narrators in this book, and one of the narrators addresses the reader directly and is basically like, hey, you're reading a book, and this is the steps of this book of this particular hero whose name is Gonzalo. He's on the front cover, and you're going to follow his story and like how the demons that he faces, the monsters that he tries to defeat. And so he's kind of like a very cheeky little narrator who breaks the fourth wall. You find out at the end of the novel who that fourth narrator is, right? So there's three other narrators. The main one, of course, is Gonzalo. He's the main character. And he's kind of going, he's expecting his summer is going to be kind of fun and exciting, and at least he can get away from all the stuff that he's had going on, living in Los Angeles over the last year. So he goes up north to Mendocino, California, for what he hopes is going to spend some time alone with his very grumpy, ornery grandfather, who happens to be a very famous children's book author. So if you think like his grandfather wrote what the equivalent of Percy Jackson is in this world. Okay. The catch, though, Gonzalo's never read any of his books because he doesn't kind of really like those weird fantasy books. So he's just kind of like, nah. So he doesn't read them. But Gonzalo's going through some stuff. He particularly likes to take pictures of landscapes, right? And these landscapes of what one would imagine on the Pacific coast, you see the beautiful waves, you see the cliffs. Well, these pictures that he takes then become the sort of templates for these horrifying creatures that he starts drawing onto these pictures, onto these photographs, right? Specifically, these green eyes that start following him in all of these landscapes. And he's kind of afraid of them, but he keeps drawing them because he thinks that, he's trying to somehow fight this monster that keeps appearing in his pictures. All right. So here you have these two characters. Uh-huh. And of course, any great story, you want to put these two very different characters. So the one grumpy grandpa, the one kind of sad, melancholy kid. One is an artist, a visual artist. The other one's a writer. I wanted to put them in a car together and drive them across the country from Mendocino, California, to my hometown in Miami, Florida, for the launch of his grandfather's final book. So what happens on this road trip is, Gonzalo starts reading his grandfather's stories because he finds that taking pictures and drawing makes him nauseous in the car. He's left with nothing else to do. So what does he do? He starts reading, right? And as he's reading, he's like, he starts asking his grandfather question, his abuelo. He's like, well, what is this, what is this? And so his grandfather then becomes another narrator in the story. And his grandfather starts telling him basically his story of escaping Cuba. Uh-huh. And so as Gonzalo starts listening to his grandfather's story and he starts reading his grandfather's books, he starts piecing together the inspiration, the influences of his grandfather's life story and the fantasy books that he wrote. He starts then putting together what kind of drawings he's drawing and why, right? His kind of drawing from his own personal experience and how these stories are making their way. So he's a third. Then you have another narrator, which is the fourth narrator. And of course, that's Mom. Mom is basically she's running the empire of her father. Uh-huh. She is very on the go. She's like a hyper, organized. She's like constantly trying to make moves. She's really the caretaker of this whole family fortune, this family legacy, right? Like she says, I'm trying to keep your stories alive in the public consciousness. And she tells her dad at one point when her dad is like, stop, I don't care about any of this, right? And so that's where she's at. And so you hear her version of events, like her life story, and how she's become this very, I want to say like type A, very like I have to take care of everything. I have to like make sure everything is put together. How she becomes that. So it's all these characters. And of course, I add her into the car. At one point. So like all of these three characters with these very complex ideas led by this one kid are all basically driving across the country to this epic bookstore in Miami for the launch of his final book in his grandfather's series, right? So this is where we're at. So back to the title. I'm looking at this title, I'm like, well, I feel like, how does the hero's journey relate to the journey of life? Right? And so I kind of started fiddling around with, at first, I'm like, oh, I want to be very poetic, when the sky touches the ground, or, I started doing all these like very poetic, because there's some really beautiful books out there, that have such great titles. And I was like, well, maybe I should be poetic. And I said, you know what? That's not really what my brand is. Like, I kind of have this sort of sneaky deep, like where you have fun and then you realize, and I've had a lot of people tell me this, is you're really reading the book and you're laughing, and then the next page you're crying. And then you're like, the next page after that, you're laughing again. So this is so I wanted to add this sort of element of kind of fun, but also interesting. What does this mean? And so I ended up coming up with a hero's guide, because it's the guide, right? The one of the narrators is basically guiding the reader through this journey of these three characters, and a hero's guide to summer vacation, because you're on summer vacation with the expectation that, oh, summer's fun. You jump into water, you swim, eat ice cream and all that. But it's very different, right? Than what it actually is in this book. And so that's kind of like the whole sort of evolution of the title and how it came to be.
And, when I asked that question, I was expecting you to say what most authors say is like, it didn't start off with that title, but then my editor said it should be this. And I didn't like it at first, but now I love it.
Yeah, no, my editor, when I send my editor A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation, they were like, well, I mean, maybe, it's just like the book is really kind of profound, and it's like, kind of, we were like toying with the idea, and I kind of it kept coming back to me. I'm like, no, this is what the title is. And of course, it's such a great partnership when you work with an editor that really gets your work. So I felt really supported, in the process. And my editor was like, listen, let's go for it. Like, it's your thing, let's do it. And so it helped really, it helps to feel supported, and that's a really good process when you're a creative, is when you have a good team behind you that's really getting what the work that you're trying to do and is behind you.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'm really happy. I'm so fascinated that the kidlit book industry is a lot more complex than people think out there. I think most people think, and I actually heard John Grisham on a podcast talking about, how easy it is to throw a kid's book together. And it certainly is not. And it's a lot of work. And there's a lot of
I'm happy to have a conversation with John about the ease of a picture book.
Well, I think somebody asked him a question about what he's reading now, and I think his answer is, well, I read 20 books this weekend. People, like this. He goes, yeah, I was reading to my grandkids or my kids or something like that. And he goes, who writes these books? 32 pages, get it over with, like boom, boom. So, but it was a long time ago I heard that, so I might not be quoting him accurately when I don't want to start any wars in the literary field. So, you were talking to me before we hit record about why you love writing for this middle grade age.
Yeah, I mean, I've written for television, I've written for, adults, I've written, poetry, I've done all kinds of different things. This is a sweet spot for me. I really like this age group, which is essentially, I would say, probably 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, but really like the heart of my work is 6th, 7th, and 8th. I love talking to this age group. I love being, around them. I love, I love how honest they can be with, not they can be, how honest they are with how they feel about things. If you get a middle schooler and they are responding to you, it's like you just won an Oscar. Like it has, because they're so brutally real, right? They're figuring a lot of things out. I told you earlier, it's like having a Ferrari engine and having to ride a tricycle instead, because they're not out of into high school. They're not driving cars. They're not fully, independent. They're still kind of have to get picked up from school from their parents or their caretakers. They still have to kind of like stay within the system of caretaking, but they're wanting to get out. Like they're like, I need to do something, and it's such a cool age. When you make a middle schooler laugh, it's like the greatest feeling on earth, right? When you make them think, when you make them kind of feel the things that matter to them, when you're not talking to them. You're not talking down to them. You're not trying to like give them some sort of life advice. You're just talking to them on the real. That's the best, you know? One of the best compliments I received was from a principal, in one of my travels. I go all over the country. In one of my travels, I was, you know, maybe a 500 eighth graders or something like that. And we were all in stitches. We were laughing. We were having a good time. You know, there's some thought stuff that goes into, you know, the thoughts about identity, about culture, about family, about community. What does all those things mean? But we're also laughing, you know, we're thinking about stuff. And when the principal came up to me afterwards and said, you know, you speak middle school. And I thought that was such a great compliment, you know, because it's like, that's me sitting in those seats listening to some guy talking to me with me. He's not talking at me. So that's what, like, I approach it that way because I remember being that age and just being like, look, I just want somebody to be real with me. Like, treat me with respect. Like, don't treat me like a little kid, you know, because I'm dealing with all kinds of stuff right now, you know, and like, treat me with respect, you know, like, and that's a great age. So that's why I love this age so much. It's just a very raw, very true, very pure age. And they're just awesome. I love it.
You know, you just made a memory flash in my head. I was back in 8th grade going into high school, I think. And I was staying, with my cousins who lived on Cape Cod. And, my great uncle was also there and we were going to build a patio for the home. And we worked hard all day long and it's hot and we're breaking our backs. And my aunt came home and she said, no, this is completely wrong. You have to start over again. And, after she went in the house, my uncle just went on a tirade and was effing this and effing that. And I thought, he's talking to me. He's like, let me hang out with the adults. This is really cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have to say too, so one of the things that I talk about when I talk especially to the middle school age groups, right? I'm like, it sometimes sucks. Like middle school is not like some like rosy place. Like it sucks. It's hard. I mean, I had some really tough moments. I had some great moments. It's, you know, and I think it's important to recognize it's not like, oh, it's all great. They're all fun. It's like, there are some really tough, really sucky moments being in middle school, but there's some also really great ones. And it's kind of such a formation, making age. And so you think fondly, like you're saying, like that story you just said, like you remember some things, good things, and you remember some bad things. And then you kind of like help those memories from middle school. They start forming, who you are as an adult, who you are as a young adult, you know, and they kind of like start making their way into the fabric of who you become.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really pivotal time in kids' lives. You know, looking back at my son and daughter going through middle school, and it was very difficult for my son, but thankfully he got through it.
Yeah, my daughter was the same. Like she had a tough middle school experience. And you know, now she's this like she's graduating high school now with, you know, like, you know, AP classes, and she's going to the theater school and just like this amazing kid. You know, my son, on the other hand, he's in 8th grade now. And he's like the king of the school, and it's a very different experience. He's learning like the challenges that come with that sort of expectation. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that he's kind of living in right now. So my daughter fought through it. My son has to kind of, I've noticed that he's had to kind of taper himself a little bit and show that, you know, that because I have this position, I have to show a little bit more grace. So that's the lesson. And for my daughter, it was the opposite. It's like, I need to show the world how extraordinary I am. I have to push through. And so it's kind of an interesting way. I mean, I got both bird's eye, view of how they both kind of like got through all that.
Yeah. Wow. It's, you were mentioning how much fun it is to be in front of middle grade audiences and making them laugh. I agree. One of the things that was really neat for me is when I go in to a school and my costume's a little bit silly and I'm going to be doing magic. And the middle school principal looks and goes, oh, he's going to get killed today. And then he comes back to me and he goes, 2 minutes into the show and you had them as kids again. That was great.
Yeah, it's great. I get similarly, when I go in, I get the librarians. Librarians are so great. Like they're so, like they're such caretakers of stories, and I can't ever speak enough good things about them. And whenever I get invited to go somewhere, the librarian's like, okay, so like, what's your PowerPoint? Like, send me your PowerPoint, send me your this, send me your that. And I was like, I don't have a PowerPoint. I just need a microphone. And they were like, well, what do you mean? I was like, no, I don't, it's just me. It's just me. I do a 45-minute stand-up set. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's like an educational stand-up set, and it's so neat to see how there's like a little bit of nerves. They're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? And then, 5 minutes in, they're like, oh my gosh, he's got them in the palm of his hand,
Yeah. It's like, for me, it's almost as much fun surprising the teachers and the principals in the way that you're talking about as it is for the kids. You just kind of sitting there going, and you can see that they're worried and you're backstage or in front waiting for the kids to start. And you just know the minute you step on, it's like, yeah, I got these guys.
Yeah. It's cool. And it's like, if you're real with them, that's it. It's just about being real. It's about being honest and true with them, and that's what people want. That's what humans want. And these kids are going through a lot more stuff than we went through when we were young. You know what I mean? Like they have to deal with so much more stuff. And it's like, if they have somebody that could just be real with them, like they could be on stage and it's like, look, I'm an adult, I'm up here, but you know what? Like, I'm going to be real with you for the next hour. Right. I think there's a profound thing that happens when they connect with you in that way. They're like, okay, I feel seen. I feel heard, and I feel like there's somebody out there that's like, all right, is not talking down to me. Is not telling me go, line up in line, go do this, go do that. It's just like, they're just talking real with me. And I think that carries forth, into their, I think, development, into their lives. My books have that too. My books are very kind of, they don't, I'm not trying to preach anything. They have a lot of layers to them. And like many of my colleagues who have really great stories that just have all these layers in them, I think that is, the authors that do that are showing the respect to their audience, right? A young reader, wants to feel connected and wants to feel like that story that they're reading is somehow connected to their own experience, right? Or they're learning about a new experience. And I think that the more layers that you have, I think the better it is for them to kind of find different access points.
You're talking about being in front of kids and being real with them and communicating with them. I'm imagining that you've had kids ask you some pretty profound and surprising questions over the years. Is there one or two questions that stand out to you as being incredibly profound, or I didn't expect to hear that?
I do it all the time. When I'll go in, one of the first things that I do is I start speaking Spanish for like a couple of minutes. I go, ¿Quién aquí habla español? A ver, dime quién, and I start doing I start speaking in Spanish very intentionally. And, because I travel in so many different places, sometimes I'll get, 75% of the audience is raising their hands. And sometimes it's just 2 or 3 kids. And I remember being in Wisconsin, and the teacher, the librarian that was bringing me, she was like, look, listen, this is not a school. This is a like Latino school. And in fact, it has, there's just not a lot of, they don't see a lot of Latins there. Let's just say that. And I was like, all right, that's fine, and I, I did the same thing. A ver, ¿quién aquí habla español? A ver, bueno, vamos a... And then I said that. And the kids immediately were like, what are you talking about? I don't know. What are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying? I go, pero nadie aquí me habla español. And one kid, she raises her hand. She goes, yo sí hablo español.
Ah.
One kid out of 300.
Uh-huh.
I look at her and I go, bueno, entonces vamos a hablar español tú y yo un poquito. And then the kids are like, wait, but we don't understand what you're saying. I'm like, if you don't understand what we're saying, ask her. She's your classmate. Right? And it was such a beautiful moment because she grew very proud of the fact that she was speaking with this person that was invited to come, right? And then like my picture's all over the school and they're like, oh, we're speaking this language. And the other kids are like looking like this. And I'm like, just ask her, talk to her, ask them what we're talking about. And instead of fighting that, we don't want to do that, it sucks, whatever, they kind of like, well, what is he saying? What is he, and then they were like, I forgot what her name was, but it's like, well, they're asking her, addressing her, well, what is he saying? What is he saying? And she turns to them and starts having this conversation with, well, you were talking about speaking Spanish and that he comes from Miami and he's this and that. Oh, cool. And then the kids turn to me and they go, hablo español too. Hablo español too. And so there was this communion that happened from something very specifically cultural between myself and this one kid. And then all of a sudden it just created this kind of very nice moment. I didn't hit it over the head. I didn't say, oh, you guys should learn Spanish. It was just kind of, let's talk. Let's just do this. And it became a very special moment that sort of kind of personified what stories are, right? Is that this sort of connection that we can all have. You don't have to be from the place to be connected to the story, right? And I think in that moment, that was a really special thing that happened. I have tons of stories like that, where I'll come in and I'll just start talking and it's just like, I want to test the room, And sometimes sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's a huge group of Latino kids and they're all like talking in Spanish. And then there's a few of them that don't. And I'm like, well, does somebody not speak Spanish? Right? I was like, okay, so let's, and I do the reverse, right? And then it just keeps creating this sort of, through two languages, it just keeps kind of, breaking the barriers that we establish for ourselves, right? Of like, well, I'm from here and you're from here. And so we can't really, we don't really understand each other, right? And I think that if we do it with kids, if we're like, and we don't do it in a way that feels like it's bashing them over the head with it, like, I think that there's an entry point that we can find for them, right? So that they carry that forward,
Awesome.
And so, you just do it in little ways. And I have found, I mean, Jed, we can talk for hours about the stories that I have. I mean, there's just there's so many great ones. There's some tough ones. I've had some tough ones, of course, where people kind of push back on it. The funny thing is the tough ones are usually the adults.
Oh, preaching to the choir, my friend.
It's usually the adults that you have a tough time with, but I'm not here to wither away and back down from anything like that. And I'm not really trying to pick a fight with anybody. I'm just talking real, The things that I talk about are family, community, culture, and abuelas, my grandparents. I'm like, go ahead and argue with me against that. You know what I mean? Like, bring John Grisham and tell him to argue with me about that.
Well, don't anybody dime me out to John Grisham here. So
no. It's just we're just having fun.
Tell everybody, please, where they can go to find out more about A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation and find out more about you.
So A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation, it comes out May 6th, 2025. So in just a little under a month. I will be going across the country on a big national tour, so you might catch me there. But I definitely, if you are interested in pre-ordering, you can pre-order it anywhere books are sold. You can follow me on pablocartaya.com, or on Instagram at phcartaya. I don't do the other one, but I'm still on Instagram. You can find me anywhere there, and yeah, happy reading. And if you like road trips, this is the book for you.
Yes, indeed. And I've done that trip from Orlando to Los Angeles. And
did you? Oh, fun.
Yeah, it was Boston, Orlando, St. Louis, Los Angeles.
And that's a good one.
And back home to Boston. Yeah, it was. We have an amazing country.
Yeah, we really do. We really do. And I kind of purposely like the book, like I had it go in places that one wouldn't expect. Like he goes to Mendocino, Santa Rosa. He goes to a small town just outside of Reno, goes to Salt Lake City. And they kind of make their way through Wyoming, down through Nebraska, up to Kansas City, down to Nashville, to Atlanta, and then down to Miami. And it's kind of like this interesting sort of road trip. And what you find is that the grandfather's actually meeting people from his past, like these Cuban Americans who are living in like these different cities and places that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
You know?
I expect people are going to have a lot of fun checking out A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation.
Thank you so much, Dad. I appreciate it.
Hey, Pablo Cartaya, thanks for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. Oh, I have a feeling this is going to be a delicious interview. I can't wait. Joining us right now from St. Louis and Missouri. Our guest is here today to celebrate her book. It's called A Very Asian Guide to Korean Food. Please welcome to the show, Michelle Lee. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Hi. Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm delighted to have you on, and I have to tell you, I'm not real familiar with Korean food. I'm familiar with lots of other food from lots of other Asian countries, but Korea is not one of those countries. So I need you to guide me.
Well, I'll make sure that you get a copy of the book. How about that?
That sounds great. Well, tell us about the book.
Well, the book is really a very simple, very Asian guide to Korean food. We put it together because of a viral moment that happened to me in January and kind of became the, I guess, the seed to start a foundation. And so now the book. Basically, someone in January, I work in local news, and so I was doing a story on what Americans eat on New Year's Day. And growing up in Missouri and even living in the South, not everyone has a New Year's Day food tradition. Do you?
We have a New Year's Eve tradition, which is Chinese food.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I love it. Sometimes it's our Christmas tradition, too, if we're not planning well. But, yeah, so I work on the news, and I'm a news anchor and reporter, and I said, traditionally Americans eat greens for wealth or pork for progress, kind of like a Southern, really, dinner. Having lived in North Carolina, I was like, I ate this a lot in North Carolina. And then at the end of the story, the 20-second story, I just said, and I had dumpling soup because that's what a lot of Korean people eat. And so right away I had a couple of really nice comments like, oh, my wife grew up in Korea. Our daughter's making this soup for the first time. And I had another nice tweet that was like, hey, our young people see that. That's cool representation. I mean, I thought it was a pretty inclusive moment for a 20-second story. But then I got a voicemail from a woman who called and said, I'm just kind of offended because if white people talked about what white people ate, they would get fired. And Michelle was being very Asian, and she just needs to keep her Korean to herself and talk about what white people eat. And so I was kind of shocked. I had a lot of emotions, actually, but I shared that. It ended up going viral around the world. We did a big fundraiser using the hashtag #VeryAsian, ended up on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Ellen gave me $15,000, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with this money? And had been already talking to a few people, and the immediate response was, well, let's put the money into a foundation. So then we have the foundation called the Very Asian Foundation, and then here we are with the Very Asian Guide to Korean Food.
Wow, there's so much to unpack. First, I can't even begin to talk about the level of dumbness that comment was. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. You know what? It's interesting because I did talk to the woman later. People, I don't know if they have bad days, if they really feel that way, if they have moments where they, are deeply regretful. I don't know that woman's name. I still never have been able to share her identity, and I don't want to. So I felt like it was kind of a learning lesson for us all, right? And I don't begrudge her. In fact, when I went super viral, I wanted to make sure that she didn't get, quote unquote canceled, right, because that's something I don't believe in either, cancel culture. But it's interesting. I will say this because I'm adopted. So I grew up in Missouri. I'm a Midwestern girl. My parents are white. My husband's white. My child is mixed race, and in St. Louis and in the Midwest, there's a lot of community building and solidarity as well. Like we just, I think that whether you are quote unquote very Asian or not at all, we all have a right to bring our humanity to our spaces. And so anytime we even learn about culture, even if we had, let's say, Korean parents don't guarantee that you're going to learn culture. I have a lot of friends who grew up and said, my parents didn't teach me language, or they didn't teach me how to cook because they just were too busy, or they wanted me to assimilate, into, or I just wanted to be like every other kid. I didn't want to do this, or learn this. So, I think no matter who we are, we have to be very intentional about what we're bringing into our lives. Mm-hmm. My husband has a Polish grandfather who immigrated here, and his whole family, none of his family speaks Polish anymore, so there's always this intention when we go to any festival, a Polish festival, or, his Dutch heritage, or, now my Korean heritage. It's a lifetime of learning. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's where we are with the book.
Well, I love the idea of the book. I love when you were talking about dumpling soup. It just immediately brought back a memory. We've hosted international kids here in our home, and a number of the kids that we've hosted that have become part of our family are from China. Yeah. And one of my Chinese daughters from a city named Zhejiang in China taught me how to make dumplings from scratch.
Nice.
It took all day long. Absolutely. My wife comes in after 2 hours. She goes, you can get those wrappers at the supermarket, but it's it won't be as good as us rolling this stuff out. And
right.
And it's just such a wonderful experience and a wonderful memory. And food has that kind of magical ability to bring people together, I think, and to create memories.
Absolutely. I mean, so much of our lives is centered around food. If you think about how we celebrate, we eat. How we mourn, we eat. If we're feeling lonely, we eat. There are so many things that our lives really center about the food that we eat. So, or center around the food that we eat. So, in Korean tradition as well, so much is about food, and it's really about the labor-intensive process of creating the food. We do dumplings as well, and I will say, I just told you I'm adopted, but in the 90s, I met my entire birth family. Oh. So I'm in connection with my Korean parents who are still married, and then I have 3 sisters as well, and I actually helped one of my sisters immigrate to the United States, so she lives in Texas. In fact, I always joke, I kind of helped her meet her husband because I put her on a dating app and she met her husband that way. So, she's so happy, and she is so great, for me because she's like my Korean encyclopedia and my Google machine. I just say, hey, what about this? And she has really taught me a lot about Korean culture. And then I've gone to Korea several times. Mm-hmm. So she gave a lot of great input to this book as well, because I would say, oh, I really like kimbap. Can we put this in? Which is, it kind of looks like kind of looks like sushi, I guess, if you weren't familiar with it. But usually it's like Spam or some sort of, usually Spam, eggs, a radish, rice, carrots, I think. Depends on, now I'm like blanking out. But then you roll it up in seaweed and rice, and it's so good. And what usually people end up doing is taking it on school picnics. Like, it's a really big thing that kids remember, taking to school picnics in Korea. So we added that little line in the book, and she said, oh my gosh, I remember doing that every summer. And we would also, bring extra for our teachers and all that kind of stuff. So she has some really incredible input in the book. And then we also put in a lot of fusion dishes like Korean tacos and, which are like, who doesn't like a taco, right? And Korean fried chicken, so those are fun things to add.
That sounds really fun. Now, the book is the book a traditional cookbook, or is it a picture book, storybook?
Picture book. When we wrote the book, we came up with we identified the foods that we wanted to add to the book. And of course it's like, puppies, like I left out some of my favorite puppies in the book as well. But then I was just so impressed with our illustrator, Rebecca, because she brought it to life and it was incredible. And I loved her illustrations. They were funky and fun and they felt really fresh to me. And, some people are visual readers. And so I thought that this was a really great way to introduce the food. And just having Rebecca being Korean, Canadian, she has the opportunity to really know the food as well and give her own input.
One of the things we encourage families to do, especially with certain books, is to take a picture walk through the book before they read the story. Just sit down and look at the pictures together and guess, what do you think might be happening here? What do you think this is? What do you think that is? And it's a really fun way to experience the book because parents are always complaining, I have to read this book for the 500th time.
Right.
Well, you don't have to read it the same way every time. There's different ways to experience a book.
Yeah, and we do that now, especially because my son is 3. So it's, always about the pictures. It's always about like, what do you think they're thinking? Or what do you think that is? What are they doing there? And it's incredible because he will remember the way he feels about the pages and he will end up reciting things or telling his own stories, So sometimes in some books he will be able to, kind of memorize. And so he mimics reading, which I love. But then also when he doesn't do that, I love how his imagination takes off because he's looking at the images and coming up with his own stories. So it really feels like an experience, when you get to walk through the book and look at the illustrations first. And I'm really hoping that when he sees the book, that he will be able to see how shareable food is, how approachable it is, even though we wouldn't probably say approachable, but just that it looks like a regular, a regular American dinner, shared among people that you love. So I'm really hoping that he sees that.
Yeah. So it's obvious the benefits that your son is going to, get from reading a very Asian guide to Korean food, to see the foods that are on his table, oftentimes represented in the pages of the book. But what about other kids from white families, African-American families? What's the benefit for them to kind of look through the window of the book to see these dishes?
Well, I think it's a really easy, win for families, all people, because they get a chance to not only see themselves in some cases, right, like my son maybe, but also to learn about others. And a lot of times the only way we get to learn, or should say the only or the first way we get to learn about a culture is through food. So you might see something on the page and go, oh, that looks interesting, or oh, that looks like something I really want to eat, like bingsu, for example, which is kind of like halo halo or like, a shave ice with a lot of different ingredients. It is so delicious. And you might not know that that is a Korean dessert. And you might go, oh, wait, but this is kind of like ice cream, or this is kind of like something else I had. Oh, wait, this isn't scary. It isn't scary to put beans on this, ice cream dish. So to me, it feels like it makes it more approachable because you can see it and then you go, oh, this isn't scary. Oh, this isn't stinky. Oh, this looks like I want to try this. You know, a lot of us in the Asian American community talk about, and I didn't have this experience because I was adopted, but a lot of people talk about remembering bringing their school lunches and getting made fun of because it was so stinky or it was weird. And really that is such a trigger for so many adults my age because it was traumatizing. They didn't want to be different. And so even now we see, you know, people my age now with kids trying to not relive those experiences for their own children. And, you know, we always say like, don't yuck our yum, you know, and I think it's so important because I just think that kids should be allowed to truly enjoy what they like eating and also being able to spread empathy and awareness throughout our communities so that kids can support each other. You know, my kid loves seaweed, like loves dried seaweed. And so we always try to give it to his friends. And you can see some of the older kids will go, yuck, that's disgusting, you know. And I always say, no, it's not disgusting. It's different to you, but, you know, give it a try. And some kids end up really liking it. And then, you know, some kids are really, the younger ones especially, are really sweet. And they'll say, no, I don't like that, you know, or, oh, I love that, you know. I just think it teaches understanding and empathy and compassion at such a young age. So, you know, I'm hoping that whoever reads the book, even adults, would go, oh my gosh, I don't think that's so intimidating now.
Well, you know, as somebody who's tried seaweed, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it's not yucky.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
You know what? I will say, if you get the dry, you know, like the seaweed in the little packets and you put it in a ball of rice, oh my gosh, nothing compares. But I'm not a big seaweed, like in soups kind of person. And when you have a baby, if you have a baby, a lot of Korean people will suggest that you eat seaweed soup, like nonstop, to help, you know, replenish, you know, all the things that you lost during childbirth. And so my sister came over and tried to make the soup for me, and you eat it for like 30 days. And I was like, I can't do it. So, I mean, I understand, like, there are some things that I don't like, you know, and I'm a Korean-born person. I'm not going to like everything, and that is okay, too.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point, because I think one of the things that we should teach our kids is it's really rude to look at something somebody's eating and go, yuck, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, it's damaging. I mean, it really does make you feel like, well, maybe I'm a weirdo then, you know, or but then you secretly, like, not secretly, but you love this food, you know, or it's a part of, like, your heritage or your culture. So you're like, gosh, you know, or, you know, it just might be the simple fact that you are embarrassed. You don't want to be embarrassed, you know. But I remember I brought kimchi to my newsroom once, and someone was like, that is disgusting. Get that out of here. You're stinking up the whole newsroom. And I remember being super embarrassed about it. And I thought, gosh, I'm 30 something, you know, still dealing with this. But yes, in reality, kimchi is a really strong smell. So maybe I should have put it in the lunchroom. But I was like, no shame, I'm doing it.
Hey, you know, a couple of things I want to ask you about. First is, you've been very open in sharing that, you know, you're Korean born, but you were adopted by an American family. And we hear, I've heard some different things about a lot of people aren't in favor of that. It's like the transracial adoption, like this, not the best idea. How do you feel about that? What's your take on that?
Sure. You know what? I think it's a very individual thing, and I can understand where people are coming from, because not all adoptions are peachy keen. Some people have been adopted in families that maybe weren't right for adoption. And adoption is trauma. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think in many ways we've glamorized international adoption, or not we, I mean, I didn't, but I think communities have glamorized international adoption. But the truth is, like, I don't see anything glamorous about being in foster care or an orphanage, or being, you know, when I was adopted, my birth father did not know that I was relinquished. And that is something that my birth mother and my birth father have had to come to terms with. And, they're still married, so they have. But, what a difficult situation that must have been for my mother to live that life all by herself, knowing that she had done that. And then for my father to not know at all, and then suddenly find out that he had a daughter. So adoption is trauma. And even when you are dealing with adoptive parents, there is usually some sort of loss there too. That's adoption typically isn't a first choice necessarily. And then there are some, I will say this, there are some parents who have said things like, we just want to help all the children, who need homes, and we want to adopt. And I always say to people, that is a terrible thing to say to an adoptee, because I want someone to be, if they're going to adopt, I want them to be selfish about it. I want them to say, like, I want to be somebody's parent because I want to love a child. Mm-hmm. Not like, oh, this little kid needs, there are so many kids who need help in the world. That's like adopting a pet. Mm-hmm. You need to be selfish about, I want to be a parent. I want to love this child. That's just my opinion, So adoption is really tricky. And even people my age, I think this is a really important topic. People who are my age have a risk of being deported. And I find that so even more terrible because, if you were born or adopted into the country after a certain year, I believe it was 2000, under the Child Act of 2000, you would automatically become a citizen. But if you were adopted before then you had to go through the naturalization process. You're considered an immigrant, which I am considered an immigrant on my paperwork. My parents had to, do all the citizenship stuff so that I could become a naturalized citizen. And some kids who got adopted adults failed them somewhere, or maybe they were adopted into a bad family and had to be, removed from the home. Mm-hmm. So there are incidents like that. And there have been adoptees who have only known the United States their entire life and have been deported back to their origin countries. And I feel like that is so shameful and terrible that that's happened to people, and that there are people still at risk of that in our country. That's a long story.
That's a horrific thing. In fact, I saw a movie about that subject not too long ago. And the idea that you could be raised to come here as an infant and raised here, and then suddenly in your 30s or 40s, deported to a country that you had never been to before is just horrifying.
Well, and a lot of times you can't work because you have to have either a family registry or a social security card or something like that you can't just get. Mm-hmm. And then also you don't know the language or the culture. I mean, I can't even imagine just being plucked from your life and then dropped off into the middle of a place that you've never experienced before. And so, and then there's also this feeling, and not always, but we used to say this, and I'm sure that this is not the words that you would use now, but I remember being, my first trip to Korea, people would say, well, once you're an orphan, you're always an orphan, and so sometimes that was the attitude that Koreans would have against, adoptees. I can't really say that that's the right way to say things now, but you know what I mean? So there's always a stigma that you carry as well. And so basically, I will say this, I have been to enough unwed mothers' homes, orphanages, done a lot of work in the post-adoption community internationally. And so adoption, even if you stopped adoption, it doesn't stop babies from being born. And I would say I love my family, and I wouldn't change my life at all. But that doesn't mean adoption is easy for me. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that I don't have bad days. And I 100% support other adoptees who are on their own journey and may not have had, an experience that they, have felt was supportive or, or even positive. So I just always support everyone's own journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and we hope that you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, we'd love to thank the folks who made this show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Pablo Cartaya. please be sure to check out his middle grade novel, A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation. Also want to give a big thank you to St. Louis News anchor Michelle Lee. Please be sure to check out her very Asian guide to Korean food. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Skylar Sheree, Megan Boucher. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.